People often say that video games are now too big to fail. In reality, the exact opposite is true. Gaming is now too big to succeed on just one platform. We're currently living through a PC gaming renaissance. A platform that saw a sharp decline during 7th gen now acts as neutral ground for both Sony and Microsoft and is vital to the success of their multi-platform releases. So, how did we get here? Today, I want to talk about the rise, fall, and second rise of PC gaming and how this shift has effectively spelled the end of most console exclusives. I'd also like to discuss how 7th gen titles are now being resurrected and given new life on PC. And finally, I want to cover how Nintendo is still able to do console exclusives through their use of something called the Blue Ocean Strategy. This is PC won the console war. PC gaming has been around forever, but most people don't know that it was also at the epicenter of the Atari shock, otherwise known as the video game crash of 1983. The crash was caused by a number of key factors, like the over-manufacturing of terrible games, and there just being too many home consoles on the market. But what is not often touched on is how PC at the time was a direct competitor to consoles. Today, even a mid-range gaming PC costs more than a console, but in 1983, you could buy a Commodore 64 for the same price as an Atari 5200. So it didn't make sense to buy a console when games on PC were more robust, looked better, and the computer could do so much more since it wasn't just a video game machine. Because of this, PC gaming survived the crash in '83 and thrived in the years after, despite the rising costs of computers well into the '90s. It was the advent of accelerated graphics that extended the wide gap in price between consoles and gaming PCs that we know today. Computers were already costing a few $100s more, but by 1996, if you didn't want to rely on software rendering, you really wanted a graphics card to get the most out of a game's visuals, and they were not cheap. On the console side, the PlayStation 1 changed everything because it could provide somewhat comparable visuals for a much lower cost. The accessibility created by the lower price points of consoles guaranteed that they'd have a massive consumer base. The balance between PC and console in this time was kept because people had more spending power in the 90s, so they were able to buy computers that were more expensive. PC games still sold by the millions, and even some console games were initially developed with PC in mind, like Tomb Raider 1. This started changing mostly in 6th gen, when consoles got games that were massive system sellers like Halo. Popular PC games didn't stop existing, but the games that people were talking about the most started to be associated with consoles because most people were playing them on consoles. The lower price point of consoles and their ability to be played with other people more easily made them more appealing both financially but also socially. More people were becoming gamers, and while PC had great exclusives and ports of big games, a computer was becoming a hard sell for gaming. A child or a teenager was more likely to be drawn to a console or a handheld because they just played games immediately. With a computer, there were so many more steps than just putting the game in the disk drive. This was especially true because the quality of PC ports started declining rapidly by this point. Arguably, consoles gained their reputation for just working largely in 6th gen, when most people remember just putting a game in a console and it working without issue. On PC, you needed drivers and prerequisites to install a game, and then if the port or the game was unoptimized or buggy, it didn't even matter how much trouble you went through to install it. I'm not sure a single person on Earth would rather play the Ubisoft PC port of Resident Evil 4 over the GameCube or PlayStation 2 versions. Unfortunately, this time was also when publishers started realizing that there were many associated costs with PC games that they simply didn't have with consoles. The most obvious one was piracy, which led to the rise of digital rights management, or DRM, on PC, but what no one talks about is how piracy created a huge incurred cost with PC games because of customer support. On May 10th, 2006, a game called Sin Episodes Emergence released on Steam. Within 4 hours of the game's release, it was cracked by a torrent group. The game had some issues at launch that were fixed a week later with a patch you had to download through Steam. Despite that patch, the studio's customer support kept getting calls about issues with the game. Support would ask them if they had let Steam install the patch. The people on the phone would then ask, "What's Steam?" It turns out that more people who stole the game were calling customer support than those who bought it legitimately, at a staggering ratio of 5 to 1. Basically, customer support was wasting their time and the company's money trying to solve the problems of people who pirated the game, which basically never happened with console games. And that was the final nail in the coffin of the golden age of PC gaming. Coming into 7th gen, we are officially in the dark times for PC. Because they sold a ridiculous amount of units, consoles became the primary development platform for video games. Many publishers stopped putting their games on PC entirely, and a sizable portion of the ports PC did get were either terrible or had some other issue. There was the port of BioShock, where the copy protection made the game unplayable, and even Ken Levine had to come out and say they screwed up. There was the port of Grand Theft Auto 4, and who could forget the infamous port of Saints Row 2. These were not fun times to be a PC gamer. The US's economic recession in 2008 made it very difficult to justify buying an expensive computer to play games, and the PC gamers that did exist were stigmatized by publishers who created a strange, self-fulfilling prophecy. Publishers would release the worst PC port you'd ever seen, no one would buy it, and then they'd say, PC gamers don't buy games. What? It's a miracle PC gaming survived this era. It did it through the rise of digital sales platforms like Steam, Origin, and GOG. There were still many loyal PC gamers, so the PC ports that were actually good sold well, and there was a large player base on PC concentrated around MMOs that never jumped ship to console. In 2009, the best-selling PC games were The Sims 3, World of Warcraft Wrath of the Lich King, and The Sims 2 Double Deluxe. Publishers begrudgingly kept putting their games on PC, but it wasn't until the 2010s and 8th gen where PC gaming started building momentum again with the rise of indies. Independent developers typically don't have a lot of money to make games. Back then, getting a game on console required a substantial amount of capital, so PC was the de facto platform where indie devs could publish games, since it cost almost nothing depending on the storefront. The reason indie games and PC paired so well together was because you didn't need a fancy computer to play most of these games. That completely removed the largest barrier of entry for PC, the price. Because most indie games back then didn't feature a high level of graphical fidelity, every computer was a gaming computer. It also helped that PC never severed the line of continuity between old games. So if you had a computer that wasn't strong, you could still play indie games and old games, whereas you couldn't on console because the backwards compatibility in 8th gen left a lot to be desired. Graphical fidelity was still sought after though, and PC would always provide the best experience in that regard. Gamers who wanted better visuals and higher frame rates stuck with PC, and the platform was able to amortize the cost of ports, which surprised publishers since some had largely written PC gaming off in the previous generation. In 2013, Bandai Namco released Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm 3 for PC, which was an anomaly at the time since most Japanese publishers were not even paying attention to computer. It sold very well and kickstarted a spree of anime games on PC because it proved that there was a consumer base for the product. But it was 2016 that changed everything. In 2016, PC parts were the cheapest they have ever been thanks to genuine market competition, and in the following year, the launch of AMD's Ryzen platform. In 2016, you could have built something equal to or stronger than a PlayStation 4 for roughly the same price with used PC parts. You may ask, Well, wasn't the console still simpler? Yes, it definitely was, but PC gaming had so many advantages by that point that the extra effort was worth it. A lot of PC games ran and looked better. You didn't have to pay for online. The sales on PC were infinitely superior. PC had mods, and Steam made it as easy to buy games on PC as it was on console. The children who grew up with the PlayStation 2 were now adults and weren't intimidated by computers anymore, which had become streamlined and easy to manage anyways. I remember the very first sign that PC would ultimately best both PlayStation and Xbox. In 2016, Andrew House, then head of Sony Interactive Entertainment, gave an interview about the PlayStation 4 Pro where he admitted that the new console wasn't meant to compete with Xbox. It was a competitor to PC. Quote, "I saw some data that really influenced me. It suggested that there's a dip mid-console lifecycle where the players who want the very best graphical experience will start to migrate to PC, because that's obviously where it's to be had. We wanted to keep those people within our ecosystem by giving them the very best and very highest performance quality. So the net result of those thoughts was PlayStation 4 Pro, and by and large, a graphical approach to game improvement." PlayStation was forced to acknowledge PC's growing market presence and even put PlayStation Now on PC in 2016, which marked the first time in history where you could play first-party PlayStation exclusives on PC. The only problem was that the games were streamed, sometimes from a PlayStation 3. Playing games on there was like playing through a pre-rendered cutscene at all times. It was a weak-hearted attempt to appeal to PC gamers, and it would be one-upped on a biblical scale the next year when Xbox Game Pass was announced. The appeal of Game Pass, for most, was its price, but what it really was, in my opinion, was Xbox's play to capture the PC market. They invested real money in infrastructure and providing tangible value to PC players in the form of ports. Just 2 years after Game Pass launched, PC got the Master Chief Collection on Game Pass and Steam, which finally freed Halo 3, ODST, Reach, and 4 from their console exclusivity. While Sony did practically nothing, Xbox was busy porting tons of their first-party games and creating an ecosystem that included both Xbox consoles and PC. It was finally in 2020 when PC started overtaking some major console games in sales. Most notably, Cyberpunk 2077's pre-orders were split 59% on PC to 41% on console. This was before the game's launch, and is a figure which is held to this day, with the bulk of Phantom Liberty's sales also being on PC. 2020 was also the year that PlayStation cracked, and Horizon Zero Dawn was ported to PC, marking a radical shift in their approach to publishing games. The global pandemic in 2020 would further contribute to the growth of the PC market, and even the crypto mining boom in 2021 that was full of scarcity and ridiculous prices for PC parts couldn't stop people from building computers. Now, in 2024, PC gaming is in the best place it's ever been. Imagine telling someone 10 years ago that The Last of Us, Uncharted, and God of War would be on PC. I used the term neutral ground to describe PC, and that's very much what it is. PlayStation and Xbox still compete against each other with exclusives bound to their own platforms, but PC gets them all because they both know that there's a large contingent of PC gamers who will never buy a console, but they would buy the games if they came to PC. The rising cost of games over the years has made it so that many AAA projects can't release on just one platform and be profitable. But the size of today's PC market has also made it so that games from previous generations that were stuck on old consoles can have new life and make money for publishers. I remember thinking that Bayonetta and Vanquish getting ported to PC was a huge sign of things to come. And it was. Now, even games like Lollipop Chainsaw are on PC. That's a sentence I've wanted to say for years, but couldn't until now. As someone who started gaming on PC exclusively in 2009, it's almost surreal that so many 7th gen games finally have PC ports. For years, publishers implied that PC wasn't profitable and that most PC games were pirated. That's a lie idiots still spread to this day, but it doesn't really matter because money talks. You'd be hard-pressed to find remasters of old games today that aren't coming with a PC release. That's because publishers can remaster an old exclusive game and sell it on PC as a completely new product. Capcom just did this with the Ace Attorney Investigations collection. I bought Investigations 1 when it came out originally, and I never thought I'd play the sequel that never got localized, never mind the both of them on PC. This is the best time to be a PC gamer. And even though things are far from perfect, if I could show people in 2007 everything we'd eventually get, I think those people would be quite happy. Before I go, you may have been wondering this whole time, what about Nintendo? What was Nintendo doing during the console wars, and how can Nintendo still do exclusives that don't release anywhere but their own consoles? Nintendo has historically deployed something called the Blue Ocean strategy. A red ocean is full of fish, but also numerous predators. In a red ocean, those predators compete directly with each other. Think PlayStation versus Xbox. Two products that operate similarly and go after the same consumer. A blue ocean, on the other hand, has one predator. It's an uncontested market where unique products go after consumers by offering something that the rest of the market doesn't. Nintendo tried to compete traditionally with the GameCube, and it didn't work. They sold about 3 million less GameCubes than Microsoft sold Xboxes, and both got trounced by the PlayStation 2. That of course changed with the Wii, but that's because the Wii appealed to a large group of non- or first-time gamers, and Nintendo enjoyed the benefits of no one competing against them because the Wii was so different. They failed again with the Wii U, but rebounded with the amazing success of the Switch. Nintendo does best when they don't compete, but even more importantly, because their ideology is to only release Nintendo games on Nintendo's consoles, they budget games based on what they think is feasible given their own numbers. Where many publishers have to bank on nebulous data across multiple platforms, Nintendo only has to account for one. Now, that's a double-edged sword, because if no one buys the console, then sales of the games exclusive to it will suffer, but part of the Blue Ocean strategy is high risk, high reward. The intricacies of the gaming industry are always fascinating. In many ways, PC gaming is in its own blue ocean now. What was once a competitor evolved into a necessity. As it turns out, the only way to win in a war is to not enter it in the first place. Thanks for watching.